Our
Well, day.
office.
This is our office. Welcome to our office.
This is our office.
Do you want to tell people what the ego check is and why it's important?
Yeah, it's a good question to start. I just wanted to say before we start
Mhm.
that this is so fun.
Yay.
It's like one of some of the most fun I've had with you.
Yay. We haven't even done it yet. She's just bullshitting.
The planning to it.
Planning to it.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Because it's like creating something that's not mine or yours.
It's ours.
That's ours.
Yay.
Because we so often are creating things that are your business or my company, working on your fashion, your cooking skills,
your timeliness.
So this is a great project to work on. See, we're having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Jay never believed that we'd be able to do this.
Well, I gotta maintain my brand, you know. I got my audience. I got my people.
It's Tech Bro Central.
Hey, that's not my audience.
That is your audience.
That's just you. You're the tech bro.
A non-toxic tech bro.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So ego check means, well, it doesn't mean anything, but we're trying to build meaning behind it. But when we were in Houston, we were driving Dallas. We were like looking at the sunset, and it was perfect vibes for inspo, and I think that's why it hit. But I feel like in our relationship, we often talk a lot about like the role ego plays in our conversations, and like the moment we met, within like the first day, it felt like we were talking about that in some capacity. But then it also like permeates into a lot of our business conversations and just how we do business. It's like, you know, that's some of the first things that we notice about the people we do business with, and then it also affects the type of work that we do, and it affects our flow state. So no matter what topic we talk about, like, you know, it's not like Jay ever talks about AI, but if he were to on a random occurrence, then you would, you know, like it's a topic that can connect really well to almost any theme that you want to talk about. Am I describing it well?
I think so. What's the how do you define good ego and bad ego?
Well, before that, actually, like the ego check idea, actually, and this goes back to the Dallas, the story in Houston when we were driving, is the concept of a coat check. And so if we're going to create a space where we talk really vulnerably about these themes and topics, so it's not just like, for example, with my brother, we talk about AI and politics, but imagine if we can have the same conversation around the influence that tech has in politics without our egos on the table.
Yeah.
Right? All of our egos on the table. What does that conversation look like? And can we replicate that with more and more people? So the ego check is, can you walk into a room and take your ego off, similar to how you check your coat?
And you can get it back after.
You can't, but yeah, most people can.
It's in the garbage now.
Yeah.
Yes. But when you come into the space, you can take your coat off. You can take your ego off.
Exactly.
And then you get a little ticket
exactly
at some point, and then after you're done, you can go get your coat back or your ego back and walk out the room. Yeah.
And it really symbolizes who we are outside of just this podcast, I think, too.
So how do you define good ego and bad ego?
Yeah, so that's because something that came up is we don't want people just totally taking all of their ego aside, because then it's like, what do you talk about? There's really good parts of your ego, which is like, you know, initiation, like your drive to get things done. I think that it's like the parts of your identity that are the really good parts of your ego. Like, no, I played D1 tennis, I went to the Congo, like those are like key core experiences of my ego that I bring to every conversation. But that doesn't mean that my hopes and dreams need to always be the center of the hopes and dreams of the conversation. Yeah. How would you define it?
It's a subjective definition, because there's certain things that you perceive to be good, or you perceive to be bad. And I think one thing that we've spoken about before is that sometimes good ego connects with whomever you're sharing that ego with, or that those traits of your ego with. And so, for example, if we were talking about our business and talking about revenue and customers and making money and all these things, some people, if they weren't within our community of people, would perceive that as being someone who's egotistical, or like having like bad ego because they're always talking about business or money or something. Whereas if we're around people that are like us and that we surround ourselves with, then they won't be perceiving that as having good ego or bad ego. They're just like they might even perceive that as being like a positive thing because you're opening up about something they care about a lot. So there's like this dimension of subjectivity, but also in relation with other people, and that's the hard part, because you could think that, oh, I'm an asshole because I'm talking about business, and you might be, uh, like you actually could be, but maybe you haven't surrounded yourself yet with the right people that would support that. So I don't know if I have a clear delineation between good and bad. I just know that maybe before you decide if it's good or bad, you just want to feel if there's other people that care about the same things that you do, and then share that with them first. And if you find that community, maybe actually it's not as bad or good. It just is. I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's like the common sense of, or common perception, colloquial definition of ego too, which is just like you have a big head. And that's where the subjectivity comes into play. It's like, if you've been raised with people that just all have big heads, let's say, or that's like your community, then that's all you know. So is it really your fault if you bring your ego to every conversation? Or if you saw people getting successful around you by having that, and then you realize like, oh, I need to have that too, then is it your fault that you bring your ego to the conversation? Because then you got successful from having it, and that's all you've known. But I think what's cool about us starting this now, when we're kind of early in both of our businesses, like year 2, year 3, is like that's really core to who we are. And every time we kind of come home and talk, it's like we don't want to be that. Like we really want to build a company because it's what brings us life, not because we need to hit some milestone. So I really love that.
It'll be something that we'll have to keep coming back to as we learn. We can ask people how they perceive it as well. What's it been like being a founder, and then also dating a founder?
Better than YC.
What does that mean for you?
It's just, I mean, if you want to build a company really fast and iterate through ideas, there's no better way to do it than by living and breathing and dating someone that you wake up and living with them too, which is a core part of dating a founder, because now you're waking up with them, and we turn to each other and we're like, so what's your revenue look like? And then you're asking me the same question. We're like, so who's going to pay rent? But the pace of like, iteration, and especially if you're open to feedback, like we both usually are.
Usually. Depends where the ego check is at that time.
The coat check's open, or the coat check's closed. But then I think there's nothing better than that. I mean, like these incubators and accelerators are awesome, and there's nothing against them, but to know someone really well, and then you can I can constantly put myself in your shoes and give you advice, and you can do the same for me, because there's no barrier. Like it's just, we're constantly doing that anyway as we have empathy for each other. So now to do that in our businesses, it's like, sometimes I don't want to take your advice, but at the same time, I can be like, okay, wait, if Jay was in my shoes, like, the trick that a lot of CEOs do, where it's like, if I wrote out a business plan of where I'm at current state and I gave it to someone I really look up to, then what would they do with that business plan? Like, what would the next step be? And it's cool because I really respect you as an entrepreneur and you respect me as an entrepreneur. So we can do that really quickly And then we can literally ask each other, like, hey, what would you do? And then we can check ourselves. I think that's like so invaluable.
Yeah, when people define like why YC is valuable, it's they have similar people that are going through the same journey, yeah, together, usually in the same space.
Yeah.
You're moving really quickly because of that. You have this like subtle peer pressure of like, you know, how are you comparing to the other person, which kind of drives you a little bit. And then you have a safe space to talk about, you know, these things that are really difficult. I mean, it's not always a good thing either, right? So like, what have you perceived as being some of the challenging parts about that too?
Of living together?
Yeah. As a like, I mean, living together as entrepreneurs instead of living together just generally for now. Maybe
we could talk about that too.
Episode 3 or something. We'll get into all those things.
I mean, like a lot of people will sense this because I feel like the minute we tell them, they ask, but they're like, "Isn't that hard? Aren't you constantly comparing yourself to each other?" And it's like, yeah, we are, but it the like thick skin of knowing that someone else is going to have a really good day when you're going to have a bad day is just reality of life. And so like, the faster you can accept that and like live in that, the better we bounce back. Like the video I made about having high energy, that like that is the hardest part of doing this. Yeah. The irony is that like it's not what you set out to do. That part will come. It's your how you show up every day and like your mental headspace.
Yeah.
Which is really hard because there's a lot of pressure points on you, like constantly pushing down, getting harder and harder and harder, and you have to like, I mean, you've talked about optimizing, like switching to a new gear, if you want to talk about what that means.
Yeah. Even before then, I think like when I'm talking to friends and they're asking like, what is it like, you know, dating a founder? It's
amazing because it's
me. Amazing. But the energy piece, like you're saying, is the hardest part because, like, really, there's potential risk and downside regardless of your energy. You collect independent energy, and then the energy we're feeling like together. It could be we're both riding high and like had a really great day, and then are almost like too energetic and like need to like talk about it, and then you kind of sometimes I feel like I'm maybe taking up too much space and like I shouldn't share all the wins because I want to share your wins, and like that, like again, that could be a really beneficial thing, but it also could be difficult. And then if like you're feeling good and I'm feeling bad, then you want to talk about how you had a hard day, but then you also want to make sure that that person can feel that high, because those highs may not come for another month or another couple weeks or another 2 months. And then if you're both feeling low, then it's just difficult to kind of be there and like be present for each other. So we've learned from like Brene Brown a little bit on this piece where her husband and her kind of have like what's your energy level at? I'm like a 2 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10, and generally you should be able to collectively get to 10 out of 10, or 10 out of, you know, you should get like 2 plus 8 or whatever. But if you can't get to 10, then you should be patient with yourself. Go to the sauna, like go hang out, maybe re-engage with that conversation later. I think we do a good job of that. I think that we could keep improving that piece too.
Yeah,
that's hard. It's hard to know even where you're at in a given moment.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't know who this podcast will attract, but the people that are watching this are probably more likely to be in our shoes, where you're dating someone else that's maybe not a founder, but building something of their own, or basically working a lot.
Right.
And so I think this like perspective resonates, because sometimes if it's just the relationship, there's a whole other way to approach just being in a relationship with someone and the ins and outs of that.
Yeah.
But when you're in a relationship with someone who's in a similar line of work, and then maybe you guys even work together, which is like, I feel like the phase we're stepping into, then there's a lot of ups and downs that are really unique, that I think we can start to focus in on as we dive in.
Yeah.
Why did you want to start the Ego Check? Because you love me, obviously.
Just to have a project with you. On your point, I think it's you're right. Like we have our own things and worlds that we live in, but it's nice to be able to to connect it from a professional level, but also like a creative endeavor. And I think this could help us have a space to talk about these things, and over time it'll attract other people that are like us. I think it's not even just founders dating each other; it's people that are working a lot. I think that that's like the like we walk
Or
around New York.
creative. Like working a lot has such a bad
Sure,
connotation,
right? Yeah,
but people that realize the lines between like work and home don't exist anymore
yeah, exactly.
because you can make money doing building whatever it is that gives you life.
Yeah,
So you can make the most of your life
yeah,
while you're on this earth.
right.
And so
Yeah,
those are the people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. People don't like work life balance doesn't really feel like a concept to them, and like they don't really want it necessarily, or they think about it differently
Yeah.
without having like a negative judgment around it. Speaking of like people of creative spirit, we had a pretty cool conference or event we went to last night. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your takeaways?
So we went to the NYC Creator kind of like community conference, or it was just like an event. They had it at the Maxwell House. It was started by a guy named Brett. We can give him some love later, and it was cool. Like we both new to New York. Well, you're not new to New York. I'm
No.
new to New York.
I'm like born and raised here, basically.
Actually, Cincinnati,
Maybe
Ohio.
Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm new here, and I'm trying to find my community of people, and so it was cool. Like going to this event yesterday where it was like creators of New York, and so that's a pretty broad term. So we met a lot of really cool people there, like musicians and food creators and in-house creators for like software companies. Got to meet people that I had seen previously, which felt pretty cool too, just like on a personal level. Like dab up someone that I had coffee with like a couple weeks ago, and feeling like I have more of a community here. But I think for us it'll be cool to spend more time in that group of people, because like I think if you're framing it as like creative people that may not have delineation between like working and life, and it all kind of just connects together, those people are for sure, at least that's a good group of people that are aligned with that thinking.
That audience of like, as you segment out who would fit in that bucket, it's creators, probably founders, probably CEOs and like C-suite, and the through line in all of that is like almost everyone is a creator.
Yep.
And more people are becoming creators.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be a founder if you're not creating content about your business? Can you be a CEO if you're not willing to speak and like you're not confident speaking, in front of large audiences? Like that is 90% of your job. If you don't know how to speak about your business and someone else does, even though they have way less knowledge of the ins and outs of your business, they're going to be the one making decisions. So I think that it's just like increasingly becoming a wider segment because more and more people are realizing, oh, I need to be doing this. But because of social media in the last 15 years, it's coming out of its, I think, negative connotation. It's like, no, I don't need to go get Botox and like wear a ton of makeup every day if I want to be on camera.
That's interesting. Yeah, social media is changing its perception. Like people are changing its perception of social media maybe again. Whereas like, early 2000 or 2010s, it was like the thing. Yeah, like Obama win because he was like really good with social media. You had like, the Arab Spring. You had these things that were really positive about like social media companies, and then it took a turn after the first Trump presidency, and like misinformation and like everybody like addiction, how it's impacting like children, like that's been the wave. And it's interesting now. I wonder if it's coming back up again because people are realizing that might be one of the few ways to build a business and find opportunity for themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. It's a good take.
And I don't think the like harmful effects of it are going to ever go away per se. Like hopefully they do, but I don't think that narrative will go away. It's just that there's another one, which is, can we pump like the airwaves with content that is going to be valuable to me rather than just consuming it? Like the 90-10 statistic of 90% consume, 10% create is going to drastically shift. And now we're going to have all these niche communities, which everyone's talking about. But then how do you build your own business amongst that. Like you have to be participating, being a silent actor and just building a product or building an organization or building a brick and mortar, and then going out and being like, "Yep, I'm open for business." It's like the people that are down the street that have an Instagram account or a TikTok, even if they're not comfortable, but they're just like sharing what they're doing, are going to attract the business.
Yeah. What are you learning from Tone with respect to helping people create content to help their business grow?
I mean, like the point I was actually going to make is that like you help creators build AI products, and we help the people who are not creators become creators.
Yeah.
So then they can build products for their wider audience.
Well, they've already built a product.
Or they've already built a
product. And now they need to grow the product.
And so it's almost two opposing sides of the same spectrum, if you will, of being a creator is built-in distribution, is faster, go to market. You can't be hiring heads of sales anymore and expecting them to go close, because they're not going to be able to as fast unless they have distribution and cold emails and cold phone calls. Yeah, you can hack your way around it and use AI to do it, but it's just not the authentic way to grow. And you don't want to be known as the guy that spammed everyone. Like that's not how you should reach critical mass.
Head of sales becomes head of creator. Like it's the head of marketing. It's like almost like the head of creative. You have sales and marketing rolling up to that maybe in the future.
And that's a lot of what we've thought about with Tone too, is like sales enablement has existed on its own outside of marketing for so long, but because marketing's gotten so data driven, they're really speaking the same language, but there's not software that connects the two for people making decisions. So marketing is all about the narrative that you say to grow top of funnel, and sales is about closing. But now you can't close unless you have unless marketing does its job. And it's getting harder and harder and harder for marketing to do its job. You'll have like one-off spikes in virality when you hit a home run, but that's not sustainable. And so to build sustainability, like, I mean, you had a good take on it from yesterday around, I think, being authentic for 10 years or something like that.
It was a podcast from Colin and Samir, with the founder of Patreon, and they were talking about how, like, taste grows over time, and that's the only differentiating piece that a creator can kind of have over time, because these social platforms will change, algorithms will change. Like, we've changed from recommending content based on the people who follow you, because it's like close friends, like that's how Facebook started, and now TikTok kind of led the For You type of algorithm. And so people have like built up 100,000 followers, and no one's really looking at their content anymore because it's a different engine. And so how do you sustain through all these different? There could be something else in the future. We don't know what it is yet. And so how do you sustain over the long term? It's just like doing whatever feels authentic to you, like just doing that consistently. The people who end up engaging with your stuff, whether they're new or old, will like the fact that they're tuning into who you are. And so that is the only differentiator over time, from what he was saying.
How are you thinking, or how would you recommend CEOs who have not ever shared to go about that? Because that can be really overwhelming for them, right? Is to be like, oh, you need to start sharing authentically across every single platform, because one could go dark and like things are going to change.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I mean, there's that narrative. The other narrative is like, just pick a platform, what it feels more comfortable. I think for executives, LinkedIn is likely the one that feels a little bit more comfortable, because it's like LinkedIn is the water cooler at the office vibes. Like that's like what they've tried to do, and have succeeded with Twitter and TikTok. Like it's your mindset is in a different space when you're on those platforms. So LinkedIn, if you're a CEO, you're already kind of like amongst people that are like you and talk like you, and so it's a little bit less nerve-wracking. It can be more nerve-wracking because you have all the people that you work with following you. So there's also that component to it. I think there was this funny visual which you can share of like, there's like starting point and then success, and then there's this valley, and that valley is the valley of cringe.
Jay's still in that.
and it's like you can like the only way to get there is actually to feel a little bit kind of cringeworthy.
You haven't gone through it.
I'm not. I will never. If I've gone through it, that means I'm not.
On your way
I'm
to
not succeeding
success.
more.
Yeah.
The more I get roasted by friends and you, the better I'm doing. Likely.
Yeah, but the issue is you always get roasted by friends.
Exactly.
So
And yeah, exactly.
every
It's
point
a perfect
is,
correlation
yeah,
of
exactly.
success relative to roasting. So I think that just like knowing that and like kind of ripping the band-aid off. And ironically, CEOs and executives have been doing that their entire career. They do that stuff. That's why they're at that level. They've had to push themselves. They've had to do things that no one else is doing. They've had to.
Yes.
So
but
what?
They've typically done it in other ways.
Yeah.
And they've not thought about it
It's the same mindset.
of yeah, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
They're already experts at that.
Go do a cold plunge.
Yeah.
But apply it to speaking or hot takes or perspectives in the market. Typically it's like your domain and your function that you're really good at.
I think one thing that maybe you can help your customers with is helping them be reminded of a time that they have done something that no one else was doing.
Yeah.
And how that helped them. And like they'll all reflect and they'll think of like 8 different examples and you're like, great, now how do you embody that now when you're about to create content? And like remember that feeling of feeling anxious about that, and then remember the feeling of working through that anxiety and getting out the other side and how good it is, like how much benefit that was.
Yeah.
People forget what that transition was like, and now they need to apply it for, you know, in your case, like helping them create content.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can find me on Patreon if you want to give me a tip for that piece of feedback.
Do you have a Patreon?
I should create one. Yeah. In case someone wants to give me $5 here and there, that'd be nice.
So Patreon, they can pay you money.
I haven't looked at it for like 5 years, but I think people, it's like a patron, like you, like
yeah.
You can.
Someone just launched a Patreon in my.
Yeah, we can try it.
Yeah,
exactly. People can just give us like a tip or whatever.
Yeah, because I think like if we look at the landscape of platforms, it's LinkedIn, obviously, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook's dead, YouTube.
Yeah, Facebook might not be dead.
Facebook might not be dead.
Start posting on Facebook.
We should try. I feel like it's just my grandma and everyone else.
Yeah, but I feel like that's where the if people think it's a certain way,
for sure,
then there's an opportunity probably brewing there that everybody's gonna realize it soon.
Yeah, but I think YouTube is really interesting, and you've talked about that. And then Patreon, and there's so many others.
Yeah, Patreon can sit on top of every platform. Like it's like regardless of your platform, you can get driven to Patreon to purchase, you know, give someone like, you know, money or whatever. YouTube is hard. I think we're gonna post this on YouTube. Like so, we'll learn the YouTube
ins and outs
economy. Yeah, because that is where, you know, the like commerce is happening for creators is on YouTube for the most part. Yeah. They get 50% of the rev share that comes in from advertising. Like, you know, YouTube generally is like taking over like so much market share from like any entertainment. Yeah. I know you like watching Netflix, but like most people actually just go to YouTube these days. And so, yeah, it'll be fun to experiment with the platform.
Yeah. And I think the demographic, and we can kind of like try to get here in every episode, but people are on YouTube because they want to learn something and be intellectually stimulated, or like, for example, watching that guy learn how to camp, like, and just following him around. So it's more curiosity driven content. Netflix is more like, I have had the worst week ever and I need to get my mind off of this and watch like spectacular storytelling in like a binge worthy, you know,
it's like shutting brain off versus turning brain on.
Yes, exactly. And so I think what I'm trying to say is what we try and get to as we think about YouTube being the platform we want to explore is what turns people's brains on when they come to ego check. And is it learning about how to, like, not that we're the experts on this, but just by nature of our own stories of how we're building companies, dealing with people that have an ego as we go and sell. And learning about how to keep our own egos in check as we build.
Just want to say, none of my clients have any egos at all. You
Right.
know? So just in case you're listening,
Yeah.
there's no ego there at all. Yeah,
Never.
everyone's very well adjusted.
Not even good ego.
Yeah, just very well adjusted human beings.